Oh boy, here we are again, gentlemen.
We are
Hey,
here.
we're here, we're here. Man, we keep doing this. I keep bumping into you guys on Friday nights, man. What's going on?
Hey,
That's right.
when you're friends and you kind of hang out all week, or you don't hang out all week, and then all of a sudden every weekend here is the spot.
There's the spot. There's the spot. That's all right. It's good to see you guys, man.
That's right. Listen, it's good to be here on the Pastors Roundtable. And I was going to say at a new time, but it's really not at a new time. It's just that the time sprung forward. So
Oh, that's right.
it sprung forward, man. So, but we're here. We're here live on the Pastors Roundtable. Where, Roger, how do you say it? Where we make ministry relevant, resource, and real, right?
Resource and real. Yes, definitely.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Hey, listen, man. We've got a great conversation tonight, but we've been tracking all month long with the. Oh, by the way, wait a minute. Let's see who's here. Who's joined us tonight? I don't see anybody talking in the chat. Where y'all at?
Listen, it's time. Look. It's time to share, y'all. It's
Hey.
time to share, man. Get out your phones. Get out your iPad, on your computer. Share this feed. We got to share this feed. We got a topic on tonight. Come on, somebody. Where are we?
Yeah. I was about to say
How many people
hello. Son,
Yeah, yeah.
that's good.
Well, we have about 19 people on. So.
Okay.
Well, you said it, Dr. Henry. It is earlier than we normally hear according to our body time.
Yeah, body clocks, man. So
Oh.
did anybody miss a board meeting last week because of time change?
No.
You're good. All right. Didn't use.
I
that
don't have board meetings anymore.
Oh, that's
Ah.
right, Roger, man, he's just gonna rub it in. Just
Right.
I'll rub it in.
No,
Hey,
listen, he's missing out.
but you don't want what I have, so I might want what you have. Again.
yeah. I was gonna say I have fun in my board meetings sometimes.
Yeah, we have fun, man. Fun
Yeah.
talking to the saints.
Yeah.
All right.
good
Oh,
stuff.
listen. We got Rodney Smith is on tonight.
Hey,
Happy
there he
Sabbath,
is.
brethren. I see
Oh
you.
boy. All right, we got to fix this. I don't know how he got all over the screen like that. Boom. All right, there's Rodney. Wait a minute. Come here, Rodney. We're gonna tighten you up. This is for those of you watching on the replay. This is the live experience that you
There
see.
you
There we
and
go.
listen, and look, we have a lot of people who watch on the replay. I was
Yeah.
at a grand opening of a I guess it's an imagination center called Innovos, and Innovis. And when I was there, somebody said, "Listen, look, keep on doing the Pastors Roundtable. I can't watch it on Friday night, but trust me, I watch it on the replay." I said, "Well, praise God." So, yes.
All right. Good stuff. Karen Hitchens Black, good evening. Glad to have you. Colleen
Hey,
joining us
Sister
tonight.
B.
Hey, there's Carlene Sinclair from Claremont, Florida. Hey, Carlene, thank you. Can we say thank you, gentlemen?
Yes.
I don't
Yes,
know if Dion
thank
saw that email,
You.
but yes,
Thank you.
we have some wonderful people
you,
who
thank you,
support
thank you.
this ministry, and Carlene came through in a very big way. Carlene, thank you so very much appreciated. Stephanie Scott is in the house tonight.
Hey, Steffi.
There she
All
is. All right. Okay, listen, let's get to this thing, guys. As people are joining, where are we at now?
Yes.
All right, we still got some sharing to do. I see 29 are with us live right now. Are we going to
Come on, get out
are
the
we going to
phone.
do anything with the time, you guys? Are we going to keep this time? Have we talked about that?
Listen,
Yeah,
we
gotta keep it.
We're going to keep it? Okay.
we gotta keep it. Yeah, I guess we're gonna keep it in March. I know that.
2 more weeks. All right. Season 9 is coming up, you guys. Season 8 is coming to a speedy close here.
That's right.
What you see on the screen, March is going to end season 8. We started this
That's
month
right.
with event planning last
Mhm.
week. If you missed it, you need to go back and check it out on the constituency meetings.
Constituency. Yes.
I think there was a resounding, we keep having these, but a resounding, we need a part 2. on this
Yes.
one. We'll keep on hitting that constituency meeting thing. Tonight, we'll skip over. We're going to talk about tonight in just a minute, but on next week, we're talking about church financial planning. We may kind of cross over a little bit into that tonight, as you're going to see, but in a broader sense next week in just general church financial planning. And then, we often talk about this, guys. We always try to get our members to give a whole lot of money to the church, et cetera, et cetera. But sometimes we don't help position them to be able to do that. By spending time talking about personal finance, estate planning,
right.
all of the things that go along with personal finance. So last Friday night of the month, we're going to be hitting personal finance. So that's what's coming up for the rest of, not just the rest of this month, but also for the rest of season 8.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. So real quick, last week, guys, very quickly, boom, boom, boom. What if people need to go see last week's episode, what are they looking for?
I have to say that I came away from last week's episode with a sense of understanding a little bit more why things happen the way they happen at constituency meetings. I thought, we can definitely, what's the word I want to say, orchestrate, but we tend to feel we can orchestrate, but there is a reason why things are done the way they're done. And last week I was able to get that understanding, and I appreciate what was shared based on from what our guests shared.
Cool. Mm-hmm. What's fascinating about this, and I think the beauty of Pastors Roundtable is, I came away last week still having no clue why things are done the way they're still done. I don't have an answer. There are still some things I think that need to be changed, and I think what I learned last week was that they can be changed, or that there are some things that are done differently, that they're not done the same way for every organization within the denomination. So whether it's a constituency meeting at a local conference, or at a union level or division level, even GC level, every conference has the means to do it a little differently. So I know that they're done differently, but why are they done the way that they are done? I think there's still a whole lot of room, and I think that's what I appreciated about the conversation last week, is we were able to kind of open that up and see that it doesn't have to be the way that it's always been.
Right, but to push back a little bit, Doc. Before you said, but to push back a little bit, though it can be changed, I got a better understanding why they don't want it to change. And I think that was that I think was major for me, because you would think they wanted to change, different. But they don't want it to change.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. Well, listen, this is my takeaway from last week. You got to strategize if you want change. This system is so tight, man, and it's kind of like. And look, and I appreciate our guests that were on our program. I mean, they spoke, to the subject. Open, candidly, and I really appreciate their perspective on it. But I learned that, listen, if you want change, you better strategize. You have to know the system. You have to understand the Constitution that your conference has, the Constitution and bylaws that they possess. And then you have to strategize to make a change. And don't be afraid to challenge the system. Don't be afraid to challenge. So if they say, listen, it's time for you to sit down. This is not in order. You got to say, wait a minute, the law, the Constitution and bylaws says this, and this. You have to do that. That's the way that we are expected to operate, so that at least concerns can be addressed. So that's my takeaway from last week.
They accuse us of starting a mutiny up in here, Pastor. we about to get canceled somewhere. Hey, that's all right. We and in order to progress, it means that you've got to have some courage, and people have to be informed.
Right.
And so we hope that we are doing a good job at informing you, or at least pushing you to some resources that you can be well informed. That was last week, gentlemen. Let's talk about this week. What's going on this week, Dr. Henry?
This week. Now, by the way, I'm seeing 38 people that's on right now. Look, this is the time. This is the time to share it. Share it.
It's going to be too late in a minute.
every church I know, we're all in a building program. I don't know. Maybe there's a church out there they're not in the building program. They don't need to raise any funds, right? But every church that I've gone to, and I don't know if I can speak for my colleagues right here, we're always raising money for some type of building project,
Mercy.
fixing this, renovating. My president came into my church, and we had a good building committee conversation, and he said you have to have what is called a depreciation budget. I said, wait a minute. That means that after every 5 or 10 years, you're going to have to paint, you're going to have to do it. And we don't include all those things in. So listen, everybody is involved in some type of building fund, some capital campaign. We're talking about the building fund today. We're talking about building fund. And so that's on the table tonight.
Yeah, that's huge. I remember a long time ago, I decided that whether I am in a building campaign or not, I am always going to have a building fund. Whether I'm even if I'm not doing any renovating right now, don't have any plans to do any renovation, we're going to have a building fund.
That's right.
So I'm excited to talk about that tonight. Pastor Wade, so that's what's on the table, my friend. Who is at the table tonight?
Listen, when we were planning this and we were looking for someone who could help us understand institutional campaign financing, I remember a family that came to summer camp, and our special guest today brought his daughter to summer camp, and we, that's a whole nother story. But I found out that he was into helping organizations finance their capital campaigns or finance their goals. And not too long after that, he was then tapped by the North American Division to come on board to help the church do that very same thing. And so tonight he serves as the director of the Philanthropic Services for Institution Ministry of the North American Division, PSI. They are the ones that help churches or help institutions to raise funds, not just churches, hospitals, schools. He comes in and helps develop plans. I might be giving him more work than he does, but helps come in, develops plans and helps organizations or institutions to realize the funding that they need to grow in this day and age for ministry. I speak none other than Michael Brown.
Hey, all right. There he is in the flesh. Good evening, Dr. Brown.
Good evening. Great to be here.
Good evening.
Man, we are blessed and thrilled and highly favored to have you with us this evening.
Yes.
We're excited to have you and PSI with us tonight. Doc, we're going to have a word of prayer, and then we're going to give you just a few minutes to greet the audience, to just share maybe some of the things that we did not share in your little intro there. But before we get started, I'm going to ask Doc Henry if you just have a word of prayer for us.
Let's pray. Father, again, what a privilege it is to be on this platform. I ask God that as we talk about this important subject tonight, that you please give us wisdom. Help this subject matter to help our churches, Father, as we expand the kingdom of God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
All right, Dr. Brown, share with us just a little bit more. People heard PSI. Tell us, what is PSI? What's your role there? How does it work? Or just a snapshot there. I'm sure our folk would love to. This is a resource that I think many of our people have probably never heard of, don't know much about. So just give us some clef notes there on what it is and what you do with them.
Oh, thank you. Yes, as Pastor Wade mentioned, PSI is a ministry of the North American Division, and we are the fundraising, training, consulting, and education portion of the church. And so we basically teach people how to fish, right? So we teach them how to raise funds, how to build an infrastructure so that they can appropriately raise funds. And we work with churches, with academies, with universities, hospital systems, as Pastor Wade has mentioned. And so we just go in and help assess what's going on. Media ministries help assess what's going on and help them to develop a plan and an understanding of what it really takes to fundraise.
All right. That sounds like a very needed resource. So I'm excited to hear more tonight.
So I was not that far off. So I'm excited. That lets me know I know what I'm talking about.
Good job, Raj.
You're spot on.
Listen, before we go in, jump right in. I know we have a few. This might be the time. Those of you who are looking, Pastor Henry, we may need to push it one more time. This is the time you want to do what, Pastor Henry?
Listen, look, your church is in need. I mean, look, the building is coming down. The roof needs to be repaired.
Mercy.
I mean, a lot of things need to happen in your church. And therefore, you need to know the resources that we have within the North American division. You need to be involved in this conversation. Look, it's time to share, y'all. Look, share it with your pastor. Share it with your building chairperson. Share it with your financial chairperson. Share, because this conversation is going to be able to keep the roof over your head.
Hold on. I need to go share this to my church, New Hope. New Hope, where y'all at? Here we go. All right. Let's hop into it, gentlemen.
Let's go.
Pastor Paul, you're up.
Oh, okay.
No.
I'm up. I thought you were up,
Oh,
Raj.
Raj, you're up. You're up, Raj.
Okay, I'm up. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Mike, as we begin tonight, what are the essentials or critical processes involved in a church building project? And what are the financial ramifications when a church jumps into this?
That is an excellent question. So the first thing that we need to really grapple with is that the thing that I see most often that happens with churches is that they jump into or want to jump into a capital campaign, but they really haven't built a case for support. So when I talk about a case for support, I'm talking about being able to tell your story. I'm talking about why give now and what happens if I don't give. So for instance, if we're getting ready to do a renovation project, we don't really want to talk about the roof that needs to be replaced or the new air conditioning unit that we need to replace. What we really want to talk about is the ministry that happens in the church and how lives are transformed.
Underneath that roof. Yeah.
That's right, underneath that roof. So people give because there's a basic understanding that we need to build in which people don't give to institutions. People give through institutions for a cause, right? And that cause is to change people's lives, right?
Wait a minute.
So
wait a minute. Hold on. That's a tweetable.
I'm writing.
Yes.
Yeah. Listen, I'm writing down. I know I can do the replay. I know I can go back and replay this thing, but I have to write it down. That's why I get 2 ways on how to get this thing in through my system. All right.
Listen, I need 5 of y'all to put in the chat. People don't give to institutions. People give through institutions. Somebody put that in the chat. Just repeat that. Just type that again. Type that over. Make sure when people come back and watch it, they catch that little nugget right there. All right. Sorry, Doc.
Go ahead, Doc.
No, it's good. It's good. So when we're doing that, then at that point, then we're ready really to start kind of the capital campaign process, right? And when we're talking about a capital campaign, just so that everyone's clear, we're talking about a campaign. We've talked about building fund, right? We're talking about a campaign that's going to be really large. We're talking about the type of gifts that people need to give that they've got. They take pause when you ask them to make these gifts, right? We're talking about gifts that usually will take about 3 years for them to be able to fulfill. We're talking about gifts that will make them step back and kind of pause and say, okay, let me see how I can do this or how I might be able to do this, and let the Spirit work with them, right? So this isn't, would you give $100, right? This is more like, can we give $1,000? Can we give $10,000? Can we give $100,000? Right? Because with a capital campaign, when we are looking at the funnel, most of the funds come from the minority of the people, right? And so that starts to be very crystal clear, because before you get to a public phase, if we're at the beginning of a capital campaign, we really want to start out by going to a couple of people, sharing the case for support. But before we share the case for support, we're listening to them, we're talking with them, we're understanding what type of impacts they want to make through the ministry, we're understanding why they support the ministries that they support within the church. We're understanding what type of legacy that they want to leave. And then when we come back to them later, we're able to speak in those terms, right? So everything we're saying to them is very relevant. And the project now becomes very relevant because now knowing that, Wade remembers when I was doing Bible Bowl, so he knows that I'm very passionate about children and children's ministry. So now when we're talking about the roof over the head, we're talking about the roof that we need to repair so that we can make more room to be able to do more children's ministry and I can start giving those examples, right? So that's key number one, is to recognize that for a capital campaign, it's very different than if you're fundraising for anything else. Because a capital campaign, the majority of the funds, about 40 to 60% of those funds, the majority of the funds are going to come from just a handful of people. Okay? That's the way the capital campaign works. Now, we need the rest of the congregation to join as well, because that's how we get over the goal line. But 40 to 60% of the funds in a traditional capital campaign come from a handful of donors.
Wow.
Okay, Doc. Wait, Doc. Listen. All right.
I feel like I'm in class.
Yeah, I'm in class now. All right. So
Right.
you have a church of like 200 people.
Mm-hmm.
Based on what you're saying about 40%, 80 people are going to be the ones that are going to do most of the heavy lifting.
Even more, what I'm saying is, let's say we have $1 million campaign.
Hey.
Yep.
I'm saying 40% of that $1 million is going to come from probably about 10 people.
Wow.
In a 200,
in a successful campaign. So sometimes what we need to do, the goal is very, very large, and I'm going to get to your full answer for your question, Elder Wade, but sometimes what we need to do is to take that campaign and make it more digestible. So to break those down into smaller campaigns so that you could have a series of either 2 or 3 campaigns. So now instead of $1 million campaign, because someone may say it's going to be difficult to raise that amount of money, we may take that and break it down into 3 campaigns. And so we may have a $500,000 campaign and a $300,000 campaign, $200,000 campaign, or a $500,000 campaign, $250,000 and $250,000, right? Start to break that goal down so that we can gain momentum in hitting the goals and saying, okay, now we've got through phase 1. Now we're moving toward phase 2. We got through phase 2. Now let's move toward phase 3, right? So that's the way that we generally have to run a capital campaign, a large capital campaign. Now, in some situations, it becomes very difficult to be able to have that 40 to 60% of the funds raised with that minority of people. In that, I'm just saying, at that point, I can almost guarantee that the goal is going to have to be shifted, right? And so if we look at what those phases look like, which is more of the question that was asked initially, we start out with a pre-campaign phase where we're thinking through things like the mission and the vision and the purpose so that we can communicate those things very clearly, right? We're starting to gather volunteers, right? We're explaining to volunteers what a capital campaign is. We're training the volunteers. And that's where I can come in and help train those volunteers to understand what is a case for support and how do we want to communicate that case for support and why is this important? And what is fundraising really? And who really gives, right? Because it's essential to understand that we start from the core in all fundraising. You start from the core, the people that have the strongest share of heart with the organization. And then we move out from there. So the question that I often get is, hey, how can we raise funds without tapping my congregation? Well, that's really difficult because the first question that I would ask is how many times have you given to build another church?
Yeah.
Okay, now how many times have you given to build a
Mm.
non-Adventist, right? So you see where that's going, because this is all about, we want to shift the focus from money and shift the focus back to people and relationship, because that's what this is about, right? And so we start with the people that are closest, but we have to give them solid reasons to give. Look, it's not like we don't give in the United States, right? The United States, if we look at giving in the United States, we give about $500 billion a year. Now let that sink in.
Wow.
$500 billion a year. And you know what segment gets most of that giving? The religious segment gets 27% of that.
Mm.
Now it used to be a whole lot more. It used to be almost 50% in the 80s. And it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller, which is why it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're able to market appropriately, to be able to tell our story appropriately, to be very systematic in what we're doing, because what worked before will not continue to work. Am I making sense?
No,
Yes.
you listen. You breaking this
Yes.
thing down.
Yeah.
No, I'm in class right now.
Yeah.
I'm in class. Don't give me a pop quiz, but I'm in class.
What
But
what's
we're going to take
really
it to the next level.
what's really resonating with me right now is what you said about the power of your story. Um,
Yes.
and I think a lot of times when we want to raise
Mm.
money, the roof is leaking and we can't see beyond the roof leaking. We got to get that thing fixed. So help, that's where we get
Right.
ourselves into a kind of emergency situation, and we're not thinking story. We're just thinking help, help.
Right.
That's the. And so, but being able to tell the story, man, that's huge, and it just makes a whole lot of sense. So I like to kind of piggyback off of what you said, and you kind of ventured there a little bit, and it's just so interesting. My church is in the midst of $1 million campaign right now,
Okay.
and we have divided it up into several different categories. So we said, number one, we're going to have part of our fundraising team is going to be our pledge team. So they are the people who are managing all of the pledges from the members. This is what we're doing.
Hmm.
Um,
Good.
then we have a team that is specifically over our public offerings. So when on Sabbath mornings we lift an offering, they craft that experience of what that's like, whether it's a church service or any other public event. That's their role. Then we got a
Perfect.
social media team. Um,
Mhm.
Part of it's this renovation. I was doing a renovation on my office, and I started shooting on my phone, just me painting the ceiling, some of the guys doing the floor and whatever.
Mhm.
And I said, look, and just in a little, what do you call those things, a short or a reel or something like that, and I said, look, I need $12,000 more. Within an hour I had over $100 something who had come in just from the social media piece. We've
Yes.
got our school. We have a school, and so we gave of the $1 million. By the way, so the pledge team, they have an amount. This is what you're trying to raise. We of
Mhm.
the $1 million. The public offerings, this is your amount. The social media, this is your goal. School, we have a K-8 school here. Give them a goal, because a lot of the stuff is for their classrooms, for their windows, et cetera, et cetera. Corporate
Mhm.
and grants, that's a team. Events, that just an event, whether it's a concert or a bake sale or whatever, people to
Right.
organize the events. And then in-kind services is the last group of the seven. So maybe
Mhm.
somebody can't give us money, but they can provide a service. Um, but with all of that, um, the largest portion is going to come from a few people within the building. And we started down that lane. How do I
Yeah.
get that crew to now capture funds to do this, to help us outside of the building? So, outside of the building, is there a market there? Should we bother with it or not? If we should bother with it, what are some of the sources outside of the building that can be
Yeah.
legitimately solicited for funds?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I'm glad to hear that you started from the inside, and you're working from inside out and recognize that the majority is really going to come from the congregation without a doubt. When we start moving outside, we need to be thinking about how we serve the community. And so this expands from maybe just the building fund to how do we fund ministry, period. How do we
Mm.
fund our food pantry, right? How do we fund the health ministries that we're doing? How do we fund um, a mobile ministry? How do we partner with other churches? The Manuel Brinklow Church here in the DC area does a wonderful job of uh, of running health fairs. So wonderful that the county actually asked them, gave them space to be able to run the health fair, right? Um, those are the sorts of outreach efforts, community service based efforts um, that external funding is more beneficial for,
Okay.
right? It's not as much for the church structure itself or the capital campaign, because generally that's going to be considered for evangelism, right?
Mm.
And government funds, then federal government funds aren't available if it's evangelism. Local government funds aren't available for evangelism. State government funds aren't available for evangelism. Foundation funds, by and large, are not going to be available for evangelism. In fact, if I go in and I did this, I went into um, Grant Search and put in Grant Station and put in uh, building fund, basically, right? Capital campaign. So let's see how many foundations pop up. About 11 out of the entire nation.
Wow.
And most of those, when you start going through and looking at what they're funding, either it was something that was set up to fund a denomination's buildings, or they're funding the community service that we talked about, as opposed to coming up with a list of thousands for the nation, right? So that's not bad news, though, because if you think about you drive around any inner city, you consistently see many churches, right? So the churches are still being built.
Mm.
People are giving, and no, you don't have to have, um, really, really rich folk for philanthropy to happen in the churches. Because when we look at a percentage basis, um, rich people actually give a smaller percentage of their money than people that are not rich.
Sure.
So philanthropy is driven by the everyday person that's sitting on the pews.
Wow.
When I mentioned that half a
Mm.
trillion dollars, 84% of that really is being driven by individuals,
Mhm.
right?
Wow.
And half of the people in that sector are in households that make $100,000 or less.
Mm.
Th- Mike, this is kind of
Ooh.
a little bit off the beaten path here, but I'm just curious because of the season that it is right now. The half a
Mhm.
trillion, does that include political donations?
That does not. Well, I'm sorry. The half trillion does, but remember the biggest
Okay.
sector is the religious
The
sector,
religious sector. Yeah. Okay.
and that half trillion is for last year, and the number just keeps getting bigger.
Okay. I know that was
Okay.
here nor there, but I just know that the climate that we're in right now, it made me think about that. How much of that is politics?
Yeah, and so in that political sector, it's much smaller. Actually, if we look at the top sectors that for giving, it comes out as religion. And when I say religion, that doesn't even count like the church school. That's in the education sector.
Uh huh.
That doesn't
Oh.
count
Oh
all
wow.
the hospitals that we run. That's in healthcare sector. That doesn't count Adventist Community Service, right?
Oh.
Organizations like that. It doesn't count organizations like that, right? It counts. It's counting what's given to a local church body and what's
So
given to
so
media.
let me
Yeah.
so let me jump in here on that question that Pastor Paul asked about funding outside of the members in the pew. And so you mentioned a lot of the entities
Mhm.
are not able to fund the building fund, right? They're
Right.
funding different ministries, the community services, and some other creative ministries that we do.
Right.
But are there any individuals outside of the pews that that seem to be individuals that would give towards the building fund? Who are those individuals that the people in the pew can connect with? What's that success rate there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a very common question. The people that give to a capital campaign are the people that are closest to the institution. So if you kind of think
Mm.
of who's closest to the institution, it's church members, it's prior church members. So prior church members are people you could reach out to. It's board, it's prior board leaders. So prior board leaders are people that you could reach out to. Um, to a very tiny extent, it's vendors that have worked with you,
Yeah.
right? But by and large, it's inside. But don't forget that if you're able to tell your story well, even though Sister Sally may not have a whole lot of disposable income, you don't know who Sister Sally knows,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Mm.
Or who
And
she
you don't
works
know.
for, or her, yeah.
That's right. And they can be one person removed, they can be 2 degrees removed, they could be 3 degrees removed. And so, if you have a wonderful story to be able to tell about how you've come into this area and you are doing this ministry where you're mentoring these kids in this area, right? And you're able to help turn around drug usage in the area, and you're telling that story and talking about all the ministry that's going on, then that gives a tentacle into the community, right?
So, Mike, are you contextualizing when you say capital campaign or capital giving? It sounds like you're contextualizing that within the framework of that evangelistic space.
Absolutely, I am.
Okay, because
Absolutely, I am.
I think when I hear capital campaign, I'm thinking facilities building, and I wasn't necessarily limiting it to just that worship space or that Sabbath space. However, I'm curious about this, and it makes me wonder. Then, oh my goodness, I'm gonna get in trouble with this one. So why? It sounds like what you're saying is outside the people in the building, nobody cares about our building. Like
Come on
nobody
now.
cares enough to help us build it. So why do we keep doing it? Why do we keep building this kind of space as opposed to, in fact, and stay with me. So instead of me renovating my sanctuary, which is a space that less and less people outside of the walls care about, and
Mhm.
less of the people inside of the walls are beginning to care about, then why would what could I take that space and say, okay, instead of renovating this to be my 2 hours a week worship space on a weekend, which is
Mhm.
why can't this be my performing arts center for the kids in my community, and I'll worship there for that hour, 2 hours on the weekend? Does that not open up more willingness or interest in what's happening in that type of space?
Absolutely, it does. I mean, you've just hit the nail on the head. When you said nobody cares about the building, as harsh as that may sound, that's basically true. What they care about is what's happening inside the building. What they care about is the
Mhm.
ministry that
Mhm.
affect people and transform lives as they go through that building. The building is a vehicle,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
So absolutely, if you can convert that space into having ministry 7 days a week happening in there, and
Yeah.
that's not necessarily then a service 7 days a week, ministry 7 days a week. Now we can go and we can talk to people outside. We can talk to small business owners outside. We can talk to the community foundation, right? We can talk to corporate foundations about the work that we're doing. Hey, you know what? I live in Dallas. This is a metroplex of like 6.5 million people, and our churches we have. I'm making this up now.
Yeah.
20 churches in the area. that have X number of members, right? Because these are business decisions for these corporations,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's a decision for the communities, for the community foundations, right? And so I have to be able to build a business case that says it makes sense for you not just to give, but to invest in this ministry. Because when you invest in this ministry, you're investing in community service in this local area. You're investing in your community. You're being a good corporate citizen by supporting this effort where we are. You just talked about personal finance, where we're going through and we're teaching people personal finance, for 6 or 8 weeks or for 3 months, and we bring them through this series X, Y, and Z. Now I can go to the bank. That's why I was able actually to go to the Fed Reserve and say, "Hey, I heard on NPR that you all had some curriculum you've been working on, and I'm doing a ministry down at Lone Star Park in Lone Star Cap in Texas. Can you send me some of those resources that you're using?" And they said, "Yeah, when is it?" And I said, "Well, it's going to be at the end of the week. I can come pick it up in Dallas." And they said, "We'll FedEx it to you." They drop
Wow.
shipped it to my house the next day,
Wow.
right? Because they know that
Yeah.
it makes sense, right? Because they're in banking, they don't want bad credit or bad creditors. They want people to understand how to run their finances so that they have more disposable income to be able to support these other community efforts, right? So the same sort of things, I can start thinking then about different businesses that are out there, local businesses, because local businesses want to give back locally so that they could show that they are, locally invested, that they are invested in the community. So if I'm going to try and raise money from Walmart, I'm not sending a request to Bentonville. I need to know the manager of the Walmart that's right here in the neighborhood, because that's who's going to direct funds into my local church so that I can have additional building supplies to be able to do X, Y, and Z, so that now we can offer, summer programs to youth.
Yeah.
Right. So that's how we can go
Wow.
outside.
Wow.
We have to have relationships outside of the pews to go outside of the pews. We
Good.
got to build those relationships, and we build them every day so that when we need to use those relationships, those seeds have already been planted and have taken root, and now we can harvest, right?
Yeah.
I love it. I love
So Mike,
Okay.
you are sharing with us. You're sharing with us tonight
Yeah.
that it's not necessarily numbers that make a capital campaign work. It is the story and the relationships that we are able to craft in order to help us move our agenda forward. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It's that story that you're able to tell, that case for support, that story you're able to tell on why should we give, why give now, and what happens if we don't give, right?
Yeah. What
Mm.
We've
happens if
got
we
to be
don't?
able to
That's
fill those three things in. And as we communicate that, then people get excited. And then you can help them think through different options like, "Oh, well, wait a minute. Um, this is a major gift. This is a very large gift. I might not be able to do all of this in cash." And you're able to say, "You know what? We can think through other things like um, stock options that you may have that you can donate."
Mm.
Come on.
I've had people that in a small church that you would look at people and think that they may not have had these resources, but they owned multiple houses in the neighborhood, right? Because they bought those houses in those neighborhoods a long time ago, when we couldn't live elsewhere. And so
Mm.
they have multiple houses that they're renting out, and they're saying, "Well, you know what? Wait a minute. I can pledge some of the rental revenue that I'm getting from this number of houses and give that toward the church to build," right? So then you start to help them to become creative with looking outside of just cash donations. But then
Wow.
they can also talk to other people and talk about, if I know other people that are excited about ministering to children and being able to have youth ministries, that sort of thing, then I can talk to them and let them know what sorts of things we're doing in our church, and they'll give. Here's a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
We had a building campaign for doing a building campaign for an academy.
Mm-hmm.
So I talked to some of my friends, and we had friends that were not even Christians. We had friends that are atheists.
Mhm.
that gave because they love us and they love our kids and they love to hear that things are being done with the kids. So they weren't interested in giving to XYZ church, but they gave and gave well,
Yeah.
right? Because of the other things we were doing,
Yeah.
right?
Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so listen, I'm telling you, I'm writing. So let me ask
Yeah.
this question here. I gotta ask you this question. So we're talking about the process, right? But right before we kind of dive into that process, well, this might be a part of the process. So we talked about the core, right? Those who are closest to the mission and the ministry. And so
Yes.
you look at your church and you see that out of you got about 100 people attending, right? But you
Mhm.
got about 20 people who are like
Giving.
really close to the core. Like they are the ones that are, at every meeting, and they're the ones that are saying, let's build. So you got about 20 people. You got this
Mhm.
big capital campaign. You want to raise $1 million, but we're going to follow Doc Brown's advice and taking it in smaller bites. And so the first one is 200,000. That's the small bite that you want to take off first. What does that look like for those 20 people? Are you just saying, hey, we're just going to go and give the 20 people the commitment and just kind of go out to the other 50 and so forth? How does that look? How do you go into it?
So what that looks like is, and this is touchy in some congregations, um, you have to have a good sense for the giving capacity of the people in the congregation.
Mm.
Because the number one thing that we look at in fundraising, the number one set of variables is linkage, interest, and ability. LIA, linkage, interest, and ability. So linkage is all about relationship, right? How am I linked to the church or that program? How am I linked to what we're fundraising for?
Mm-hmm.
What's my level of interest in what we're fundraising for? And then what's my ability to give? So I have to have a sense for what someone's ability is to give, right? And so as we're thinking about what that sense for being able to give is, and we start to think through some of those numbers and we pray through some of those numbers, we need to do this because we need to be able to give people an idea of a range that we would like them to consider.
Okay.
So you would never go out and say, um, Elder Wade, I we're really passionate about the project that we're about to do, and I talk about the case for support for that. Would you give as the Lord leads you? Because that doesn't help anyone to understand what type of
Mm.
gift
Come on.
will be helpful, right? And so we come up with ranges like, would you consider a gift in the range of $30,000 to $40,000? And we pause.
Okay.
Because they have to think about it, right? Because it's like, did he just ask me if I can give $30,000? Does he know that I have 4 kids? Right? And then the Holy Spirit starts to work and the brain starts to churn. And they do some of that other
Mm.
math I talked about where, you know what, if I cut back on this, if I do this over this 3-year period, then that might be attainable for me. And if it's not, guess what?
Wow.
I'll give you another number.
Roger,
Right?
are we streaming this to my church site? Are we streaming
Yeah.
this on my
Hey, we need to stream it
No,
to my.
we don't
oh,
Listen,
normally, but I think you need to share it.
hey,
oh,
listen,
I
Pastor
shared it.
Paul.
Yeah. Hey,
Pastor Paul, you're on it, man. I need to stream it to my church
I
site
know.
too. Right to the church. Okay, listen, Doc Brown. I'm not. Listen, you're mentioning some great. You keep on saying a 3-year period. Now, if we say 5-year period, is that too long? 2-year period, is that too short? You keep on going with this 3-year period. Is that just an example, or that is one that seems to be most successful?
And don't let
So
me.
capital campaigns can run from 2 to 7 years, right?
Oh.
And the most common time frame for them are 3 years. 5 is not too long. It's just that oftentimes people have to do phases. So if you're in a 5-year campaign and someone pledges at the end of that 5 years, then that means you have a 10-year campaign. You see what I'm
Okay.
saying?
Okay.
You have to fulfill that gift that came in all the way at the end of your campaign. But you're trying to, if you're doing things,
Okay.
the way that we've said we know works, then you're really trying to get all those gifts at the front end of that campaign, right?
Yeah.
And since you're getting it at the front end, then when you run through 5 years, you're at the end of your campaign. But everyone's not going to pledge in year one. But the majority of your pledges should come in year one, right?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's why I keep saying 3 years, because that's a timetable that is most frequently used, and it enables you to do phases without having to go for decades trying to run through some phases, right?
Couple
Uh, I,
questions. Oh, go ahead.
you want to do okay? Could you want to do some questions? Could I have I want to follow up
Oh,
here.
Okay,
So
yeah. I want to guess ask the question that I want to get to, so
go
don't
ahead.
forget
Go
that.
ahead.
Go
Go ahead.
ahead. If this is a follow up, because this is going to change the course. So follow up, and
Oh,
then
okay.
I'll come
All
back.
right. Got you. All right. So now the person that should be managing all of these funds coming in, that's number one.
Oh, that's a new
And then number
question.
two, yeah. Then number two, if you're doing this phased approach, but you got to get started with it. You know what I mean? So you start saying, hey, this year we're going to start, it's a 3-year commitment, whatever. You want to get started. How should those funds be used? Do you use it as soon as it comes in? Do you take this loan out? Is this loan idea? You take the loan out and then start trying to pay off the loan? Or is that just another campaign to pay off the loan? I know I said a whole lot right there. Hopefully you can.
Yeah.
That's all right.
He's going to have to play
So
back the
when
tape.
we're dealing with the loan,
Yes.
that is not that's not part of your capital campaign, right? That's a loan. But what I try to remind people of is that, you know what, oftentimes it gets difficult to do a capital campaign, and so somebody says, well, we ought to just get a loan and take a loan for this, and we'll be done with that. And I always remind them that you still have to pay that loan off. So you still have to increase the
Raise
amount
the
of
money.
giving happening in the church. And oftentimes that then becomes a real challenge, right? Because it doesn't happen. So there's no way of getting around the planning that has to be done. The loan doesn't really get around that. It just defers it. And then the people that were running the campaign usually exit the picture. And then the congregation is left trying to pay off a loan for 30 years.
Mm. Mm.
Right.
So are you saying? No, I was going to say, are you saying there are some churches that would say, "Hey, we'll take a loan out and then we'll campaign to pay back that loan, or we'll budget it in. So this is how much we have to raise." But when we go that route, we're not really having a capital campaign. We're just paying off a loan.
If you have the capital campaign and you're paying off the loan, that's fine. What I'm saying is, either way, you have to go through the work of paying off the loan. What I'm really pressing the button on is this: what's causing us to take the loan instead of doing the campaign if we were going to do the campaign anyway? It's usually what I've usually seen is that, well, it looks like we're not going to make this number for the campaign. Let's take a loan instead. And then we'll go on ahead and we'll have a campaign. We'll pay off the loan. But that was only because they didn't see that they were able to run the campaign successfully.
Well, so there's another reason, and that would be that the roof is falling in. We don't have time we don't have that 3 years to raise that money, so we got to do it now. So let's go ahead and get the loan. Because I made that the opposite argument. The opposite argument being, well, either way, we have to raise the money. We have to raise it if we straight capital campaign, or we have to raise it if we're paying back the loan for it. It's just we're going to be paying back a whole lot more than if we do the loan.
Yeah, and for what you're talking about, I totally agree with you. The example that I was using is an example of people needing a loan to build a new church.
Got it. Yeah.
Right. That's really what I meant. So sorry if I wasn't very clear on that.
Yeah, good stuff.
So that's fine. Mm-hmm.
Who should be in charge? That was the last one. I know Pastor Paul had a follow-up. Who should be in
And
charge?
in terms of who should be in charge of the funds, it will definitely be the treasurer, right?
But okay, so the treasurer is in, of course, they're the custodian of those funds. Should a church, or is it ideal for the church to have someone else that would be giving updates on where we are in this fundraising program?
Okay.
One that is committed to encourage people to give outside of the pastor, or should the pastor be that person?
Yeah, absolutely. The pastor absolutely should not be that person. Capital campaigns are campaigns that are run by volunteers. Okay. And that's important for a couple of different reasons. You get buy-in from a lot of different people when you have a set of people, a committee running. So there should absolutely be a capital campaign committee, which is really what Pastor Paul was talking about earlier, right? He talked about how he pulled basically a campaign committee together, and they had different focuses. Some on major gifts inside, some on corporate gifts, some on foundations. And so there would be a chair of the capital campaign committee, and most often a co-chair, because it's a lot of work to run a capital campaign. And those are the people that are giving updates on an ongoing basis about the campaign. Those are the people that are running the campaign, right? And so the treasurer is working in the background, making sure to do all of the financial pieces. But in terms of the fundraising, that is absolutely on the campaign committee that Pastor Paul pulled together, right? And so they're going to go out and they're going to be trained on how to make asks. They're going to be trained on how to tell their story, how to make a case for support, right? It's absolutely volunteer-led. Now, when the largest gifts are being made, one of the questions would be, well, who should be there? Are being solicited when people were asking them to give a large gift, who should be there? Well, whoever has the closest relationship with that person should be there, right? But if it's one of your top 10 gifts, you probably want the pastor involved, not to make the ask necessarily, but because the pastor is the one that is leading that organization, right? And so they're going to expect that they're going to hear from the leader of the organization if you're asking someone to give thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, right? But it's volunteer led.
And I think one of the other issues or reasons why I think it's so important to have volunteers leading and a part of is that our organizations and churches, and at least are not always structured for continuity. So that issue of a pastor being moved in the middle of a campaign, if his voice was the strongest voice, if his energy was the strongest energy in pushing that agenda of that campaign, and now he or she is no longer there, then that thing can stall out.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So Michael, here's a question that came way early in the chat a while ago, and I'm sorry for just going back to this. This was from Baldwin English. I got two questions coming from our audience. One from Baldwin English, who says, let me put it on the screen for us. It says, question to Michael: do you find it beneficial for churches to have their own 501c3 organization to raise money from government entities or other private foundations?
Yeah, Baldwin, that's a great question also, and one that is commonly asked. Here's the thing that is not necessarily clear to most folk. The 501c3 designation for the organization actually is with the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. And that's for a lot of reasons. One very important reason is that when an entity is going to be sued because something went wrong that we didn't think was going to go wrong, lawyers don't start at the bottom. They start at the top, right? And so we need to bear that risk in mind. In order for a local church to establish an organization that would have a separate 501c3. So it wouldn't be the church, actually. It would be a separate organization umbrellaed under the church. The local conference would have to approve that. And that local conference is probably going to have a conversation with council at the North American Division and council at the General Conference to approve that. But remember, we said if we are doing things that are not, if we're doing community service, we can apply for those grants, right? Because we're not applying for the grant to build the church building. We are applying for the grant to run this program out of the building we already own, right?
Mhm.
And so nothing prohibits us from soliciting, not soliciting, from applying for grants from federal government, state government, or local governments. As a matter of fact, every local church should know all of their local representatives. They should be very well known, right? And they should be inviting them in. And they should understand what type of ministry and what type of ministry impact we're making from a community standpoint. Because they know when buildings come available that they could let the church use. They oftentimes have grant funds available. And if you have a relationship already, then they can steer those funds that way. And I see that a lot where that happens. And so you don't have to have a separate 501c3 designation in order for that to happen. So if you want my official answer, the official answer would be this. General Counsel highly discourages the establishment of separate 501c3 organizations because there are some risks involved that people don't realize are involved. And even if that organization has been established, but it's really an arm of a local church, then we've already said, well, that local church actually is part of the General Conference.
All right. And the second phone I saw coming in the chat, there was a comment about pledges to churches being legally binding. Is that a thing where pledges, you make a pledge to a church? Is it a member legally bound to that pledge?
Yeah. States are the ones that have the jurisdiction to enforce what the laws are locally for each nonprofit. So even though you get a federal designation, before you do that, you have to get one from the state's attorney's office, right? State Attorney General's office. So the state, that varies from state to state. What I will tell you is this. In any nonprofit organization that's in a state that would say, yes, this is a legally binding agreement, a contract, that nonprofit won't be around for very long because who would get that, right? So donors make pledges and they don't know what's going to change down the horizon, that their business all of a sudden tanked, or that house they thought they could sell, they can't sell now, or someone got detrimentally sick.
Right.
So what we should be talking about are not contracts and those sorts of things. They're just they're pledges, right? And sort of for lack of a better term, I'll say gentleman's agreement.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Mike, we're going to ask you to sit tight for just for a couple minutes. We're going to take a quick break, but we're going to come right back. So you don't go anywhere. Take a break. But gentlemen, my goodness, tonight, fellas, wow.
Listen.
Oh, hey, and there we go too. Let me get that.
If nobody else gets anything out of this, we did.
Yes, indeed.
Listen, this show, by the way, those of you who are just joining us right now, this is the one I'm telling you, you really, I guess I say it every week, but this is the one really that you really need to look at. You need to start sharing right now because we are always in a capital campaign. And as Mike Brown said today, it's about ministry, right? It's about ministry. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
getting grants and funds for ministry, community services, distribute all these community programs that we have, building relationships. This is the job of the church. Share this feed, please. Share this live stream, please. You got to share it.
These are things that make me feel so blessed to be a part of this thing, this ministry that we're doing, guys, the Pastors Roundtable. Because the Lord just brings us guests, episode after episode, season after season, that just edify us in such a powerful way. And listen, if you've been blessed so far tonight, I need you to do something for us very quickly. If you're watching on Facebook, one of the simplest ways, I'm going to give you a way, and then I'm going to kick it to Roger, and he's going to tell us some other ways. But here's the simplest way that you can support what we're doing and help other people see it. Hit that thumbs up button. Type something in the chat. Let us know where you're watching from. Say hello, happy Sabbath. Every time that you type, it triggers that algorithm to let other people say, hey, there's something special going on here that you need to see. Even if you don't share it, just hit that thumbs up. Hit that, type something in the chat for us. If you're on YouTube, again, hit that thumbs up button there for us. That will just go a long way to support what happens here at the Pastors Roundtable. But that's not the only way that you can support. Roger, how else can they support what's going on?
Listen, you can be, if you know, when Mike said, give as the Lord leads you, I love that. I said, that's what we normally say. But tonight, we want your gift, whether it's $10, $20, $50, or $500. Whatever gift of those nominations you can give to us tonight, you can support us. Go to the bottom of our website, theprt.live, hit the support button, and you can share one of those denominations, or you can give more, or you can give less. We are not asking, but 5, 10, 50, or 500. We would be blessed to have that help us to make ministry, to continue ministry here as we partner to make ministry relevant, resourced, and real at the Pastors Roundtable.
We're gonna have Doc Brown grade us on our page. Let's just recognize some folk in the chat again.
We need to say. But listen, we need to say the reason why you are given what you give
tell the story.
Will help us to bring ministries or information or resources like what you're getting tonight here on the Pastors Roundtable at the PRT.live. Come on now.
And I want to tell you what happens if you don't give.
Don't give. Come on.
Hey, listen, let's shout out some folks right quick, you guys. We've got Tammy in the chat tonight from Chattanooga. We've got Hazel watching from the Bronx. We've got Carlos Medley from Orlando, Florida. Derek Lane from, he didn't say from where, but we know Derek is out in the great Northwest. I think he's out that way. Yes.
Seattle, Washington.
Absolutely. Yeah, there it is. He said there.
And I need to say that Hazel Wade is my aunt who's watching, and so I want to say hello to my aunt. And obviously, you know, my mom is watching, Ashaki Patrick. So, family, we have the inner circle being a part of Pastors Roundtable, and I know they are going to give to Pastors Roundtable in some way, shape, or form. 5, 10, 15, or 500. I'm gonna keep practicing that.
All right. Hey, Dr. Henry, we've got about 15, 17 minutes left. We've got some good questions left on the table. Is it too late for somebody to share this stream tonight?
No, listen, it is not too late. This is the time you really need to share it. Let me tell you something. This program that we're bringing to you, this is so important for your church. I know that you're in some type of capital campaign, and I know you're doing ministry. And I'm telling you right now, this is the time that you want to share this live stream, because it's going to revolutionize your church. I want to say it one more time. It's going to revolutionize your church.
Mercy.
Share the live stream. Please share it.
All right, all right, all right. Well,
Yes,
let's
yes.
let's jump back to our guest. If you are just joining us tonight, our guest is Michael Brown. He works with PSI. He's going to have to tell us again what that means, or you're going to have to rewind to the beginning and check that out. But very quickly, again, Michael Brown, just tell us again PSI what that is, and then we're going to hop into that next question.
Philanthropic Service for Institutions, or a ministry of the North American Division.
Good stuff. And it's been hot stuff tonight. All
Hey,
right.
hey. Before we jump there, I think Karen's question, which is related back to the last question, you shared with us about 501c3s. What if that is not necessary for a local church to have those for capital campaign? She's asking the question. So are those churches rogue if they secure their own 501c
They
designation?
go rogue.
So again, the conference is the one that has to be able to give approval for a 501c3 designation to be had. But understand that if XYZ Seventh Day Adventist Church doesn't have its own 501c3 designation, they may have an umbrella organization underneath it that they call, let's say, the Community Development Foundation, but it's a separate organization. Just
Okay.
like where Cedric Parker asked a question kind of related to that, and he said, "Can you talk about basically the linkage between Wells Fargo and the Jakes Foundation? T.D. Jakes has a church in Dallas, of course, Potter's House, but that's a separate foundation from the
Mm,
church itself, right? That's why it's the Jakes Foundation, right? And so
okay.
they can form a union with work with Wells Fargo or with local government and all other sorts of funding institutions to be able to do community service work. So this foundation is not there to build Potter's house into a larger house or to do repairs on
Got it.
Potter's house. It's there for other
Okay.
outreach. Mhm.
Got you. All right. Awesome. So I think I have the next question. It says, what role does a local conference office, and I think you kind of talk about this, but what role does a local conference office play in the financial aspect of a church building project? What role does the conference play in a local church's financial church building project?
Yeah. So in terms of being able to help facilitate the loans, that we can they play a role there. Basically, in terms of the campaign running, the campaign is run at the local level through volunteers. So that capital campaign committee is the
Mm,
one that's really driving things, right? The conference will want to know, of course, what if loans are being taken, that sort of thing. But they're not really involved in the campaign itself. Am I answering that question?
Yeah, because the other part of that question is we all know that within the Seventh Adventist Church, our
Yep.
our property is owned at the conference level. Does
Mhm.
that impact our ability to
Huh.
have a capital campaign on the same property that we worshiping in when we know that is owned by the conference?
You know, so all of the capital campaigns that are run, that is that is exactly what's happening anyway, right? We're doing a campaign on land that uh, is owned. If the land is owned by the conference, it doesn't stop us from doing a capital campaign. So I feel like I'm missing what the crux of that question is. The conference isn't going to come in and say,
Well,
"Don't."
I know.
Mhm.
No, I was going to say, there are those who sit in the pew that have some angst that the local church just can't do what it wants to do with the property. There's still a need to go to the conference to get permission if we want to take a loan, if we want to connect to the revolving fund. But here, basically, what I heard you just say was the capital campaign is actually dealt with at the local church level, and it's not necessarily needing conference approval to do a capital campaign. Am I hearing you correct?
You're hearing me absolutely correctly.
But
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Because those loans are
So
different.
okay.
I think to kind
But-
of push that a little bit more
Mhm.
is the idea that a lot of members feel, I don't know if it's a lot of members, but there are some members who will say, like, we put all this money into the church,
Yeah.
but it's in the conference's name, and we can't do what we want. It's there. Technically, the deed is in the conference's name. Then
Yeah.
what skin do they have in the game? They want the conference to come up off some dollars. They want them to be in that corporate and granting a section of who are we going to ask to help us raise this money. They might not be asking the conference to pay for it all. They're like, yeah, we're going to do it too, but they want to see, is there supposed to be a financial role, a giving role, a donor role for the conference in a capital campaign. And I think that's where some of our local members say, if they
Right.
ain't giving, I ain't giving.
Right. Well, I was just gonna add to that, Pastor Paul. Even with this building project, right? So if the church has a project, what's the role of the conference? And there are some conferences that have what is called the owner's rep. So they have a contractor that will look over your information and make sure it's right. And so the question is, okay, well, how do we sell that to our members? Like, we want to build something, but yet we have to go through the regulation by the conference on how we do it and what we do, and how do we go through all that? How do we navigate through all of that? How does a member say, well, listen, this is the system that we are part of, and I understand it, let's go it. Or there's some members that say, listen, like Pastor Paul said, look, if they're not putting any money into this thing, why do I even have to go to them? Or if they're not, why do I even have to give? Because it's not our property. How do we answer those questions to the members in the pew?
Okay. Yeah, so that's a good question. And I think this goes back to the structure that I mentioned initially. And when you said part of the system, you hit the nail on the head. The way the Adventist church is structured is that local churches do not have their own nonprofit designation, right?
Mm-hmm.
They ride under the umbrella
The
of the conference, under the umbrella of the division, under the umbrella of the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, who actually has the nonprofit designation. And so we're a system like that. And there are benefits to that, because when you're a smaller church, not having enough funds really to be able to be self-sustaining, not having enough funds to really be able to pay for a pastor, those sorts of things, there's some benefits in that, right? In being able to help each other to grow, right? By the distribution of tithe and how that happens. So my answer to that is, look at this in two different phases. And what I deal with is the fundraising piece, right? And that is totally separate from the building committee piece, which is really what you're addressing right there, Dr. Henry, right? And so if a member is saying, look, if the conference isn't giving, then we're not giving. Bear in mind that all the funds that come into the church come in they're collected through the local church level. Right? So if we're looking for the conference to give for a capital campaign, we're not really fully appreciating how capital campaigns work, whether it's a church or not, right? Because we've already said the people that give to a capital campaign are the people that are in the inner circle of the service or of the organization, right? It doesn't matter whether it's a university, a hospital, or Feeding America, who was one of my clients when I was agency side. I was senior vice president at a couple of different fundraising agencies, right? It doesn't matter. All of these agencies run the same way, right? And it all comes back down to the same fundraising process, which is we start from the inside and grow out. When I hear things like, well, if the conference isn't giving, then we're not going to give, it immediately tells me there's a challenge first with the case for support, because clearly the case isn't compelling enough to whoever is saying that, right, for them to want to give, right? I mean, I'm giving because I'm invested in this project. I'm giving because I'm invested in this ministry. I'm giving because I'm part of this ministry. I'm giving because I believe in the impact that we're making, right? And if people are not going to give because the conference isn't kind of giving, I'm not sure you're really going to be able to convince that person to give. That just might not be the right prospect for the campaign, right? But I think it does help people understand how the church is structured. Because I can tell you, I didn't understand fully before I became a denominational worker and moved here. I didn't understand how that really worked.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just if I could add to that, I think that for many of our conferences that I am aware of, and a lot of our members may not know this, and I know for my conference specifically, they do position themselves to be able to give towards an approved capital campaign. And you've got to submit all of your stuff and all of that, but there is a portion that I think most conferences will give towards. I think in my conference it's something like somewhere between 5 and 10%, somewhere in there. Don't call my president and say Pastor Paul said, but it's they do do something. And that's been a part of the tradition in my conference anyway, and I suspect that other conferences do something towards churches' capital campaigns. I if you're just renovating a kitchen, maybe not, but in terms of a purchase or a build, generally, I think there are funds available to local conferences.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to local churches from conferences.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Raj, I don't know if
No, I'm good with my question there.
Okay.
I'm trying to see if there was any other questions in the chat,
Yeah, I wanted to hit
but I'm
Stephanie's
not
question
seeing.
there.
Okay.
Should there be a paid fundraiser at the conference level? We got one at the division level. We have a whole department at the union level. What about at the conference level? Should there be a paid fundraiser? Would that be helpful?
So I am not a fundraiser for the division, just so that we're clear. So I don't raise funds for the division. I give fundraising counsel
Okay.
to the conferences, to the unions, to every entity that needs counsel. I'll provide counsel to them. And we have had, PSI actually used to run a grant program called the Career Opportunities Program. And through that, we actually did have, I had interns that were at some conferences. And so we helped to make that happen. And so at the conference level, it is great to have people there that can give counsel. Just bear in mind that fundraising is relationship based. And so the fundraising really happens at the very local level. So even if you hire an agency, they're really not going to go out and ask for you. And they're not bringing in a bunch of donors that you can then just count on them giving money to the church. That's not really what's happening. What they're doing is coaching, guiding, training. Okay. So it needs to happen at the local level, but I do agree that it's beneficial to have in a conference level to have some sort of fundraising support, I'll say. Okay. And they do fundraising projects for the local conference. They act as local resources for the schools, local resources for the churches. So absolutely.
Wow.
So Mike, in light of what you just said, Mike, wouldn't it be a conflict if there's a local fundraiser or a person at the conference who is developing funds for the conference, but still, if they try to develop for the local church, isn't it kind of like, hey, I'm kind of tapping into the same people in a
Oh, it
sense,
absolutely
seeing
is.
that the
And
conference is subset of the churches?
yeah, and that is one of the issues that we actually would have, is that from an ethics standpoint for the Association of Fundraising Professionals, um, what I know about one organization, I can't take even when I leave that organization and go to another organization and use it.
Hmm.
And so that would become the issue, right?
But it's
If
the
I'm
same
if I am the
organization.
conference fundraiser at a local church, you're expecting me to actually run the capital campaign for your local church and for the local church that's uh, 5 miles away. Now I have information on donors from both organizations, right?
Technically, it's the
Oh,
same organization. Legally, it's the same organization.
Legally, it's
Structurally,
the same organization.
yeah.
Legally, it is the same organization, but I think when you talk about churches and we hear my members, we're
okay.
very clear
Mm.
about the fact that we're talking about the membership of this organization, right? um,
Yeah.
versus this entity versus this entity. So from a legal standpoint, you're absolutely right. It's the same organization but from a pragmatic standpoint, they're treated as very different organizations, and the expectation is that they're very different organizations. For instance, we don't share the treasurer from Church A doesn't send records to the treasurer from Church B because they'll say these are our giving records.
Hmm.
But they're
Yeah.
501c3, so they are public records.
They're public records, but remember that religious institutions are not bound to the same disclosures that non-religious institutions are. Right?
Got it.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Wow.
I see
This.
some more questions rolling in, but our time has gotten away from us tonight, gentlemen. Wow.
Yeah.
This thing
Listen,
has been whoo, we
we we need a workshop. We just need a
yes.
workshop, man. Listen,
This
we
has been
need
awesome.
a 3-day workshop with my man, Mr.
Yeah.
Michael Brown. You poured into us
Wow.
so much. I mean, what you've done tonight, I just personally, man, you poured into my ministry. I wish I met you some years ago. I wish you worked for this organization some years ago so I could meet you some years ago. That would have really helped me.
I'm
as
glad I
went
met you
through
right now because we're going to talk after this is done.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Sounds good.
Listen. Mike, before you leave tonight, is there any final word that you want to share based on our conversation, that you want us to, just take home tonight? Because what you shared was profound. I'm gonna go back and run this again, but what you shared is profound. You see the chat, you heard the conversation. What final words would you want us to kind of want to resonate in our minds as we sign off tonight?
Yeah, what I want to resonate, and first let me thank you all for the opportunity to be able to share with you. I really do appreciate that, and I also want to take time to give a shout out to somebody that I saw in the chat, Derek Lane, who does a lot of work with churches and talking about the grant process. I saw someone ask a question about that. And I know Derek works on the community services side up in Washington right now, but he is a great resource also to talk about that local funding that I've talked about for that sort of outreach. He's a wonderful resource for us. What I want us to remember are a couple of things. I saw some Ellen White quotes kind of in the chat, and I will always remember her talking about the fact that God works from a position of abundance, not of scarcity.
Mm.
When we have that scarcity mindset that our church can't, I think it limits the church, right? We have the ability, and the cattle on 1,000 hills is the Lord's. He's just working through people to release those things, and that we have the opportunity to be able to teach people and to encourage people to be as giving as their Father. So that's the first thing that I would want to leave. The second thing that I would want to leave
Wow.
is
Wow.
we really need to be able to tell our story and tell it compellingly. And it needs to be a true story.
Yeah.
Not something that we're just trying to manipulate people's emotions or whatever. It needs to be a true story, right? Because people do want to give. $500 billion a year is given. That's not government funds. That's $500 billion a year given. And in the religious sector, it's $145 billion. People do want to give, and they do give, but they give to things that they believe in and that they're passionate about. So we've got to connect with that. The third thing that I would leave with us is relationship, relationship, relationship. You know, Sister White said mingle, right? That's what it's all about. When we get out and we mingle and the community knows that we're invested in them, then we have a relationship with the community, a linkage with the community. And they'll want to be able to support what we're doing because they see us as an asset, not just as hands out and wanting to collect an offering, right? They see the service that we're doing. They see the transformation that's happening, right? And so if we can speak transformation into people's lives and help other people become vehicles for that transformation, then these sorts of issues will start to dissipate. It's really about, can we create a culture of generosity, which is something that I'm working on with stewardship ministries here and plan giving and trust services at the North American Division to talk about how can we do that, right? How can we create a culture of generosity that goes above and beyond money? You know, it's using all of the T's, right? So those are the things that I would leave with you. Be encouraged. It's not about knowing rich people. I don't really like the term philanthropy because, you know, when I was growing up, nobody talked about philanthropy around my dinner table. You know, but folk were giving, right? They were giving, and they were building churches, feeding the homeless, right?
Sending kids to college.
So, you know, that's yeah. So that's what I would leave with you. Those are the points I would leave.
Awesome.
Powerful.
Mike,
powerful,
thank you.
powerful
Thank
stuff.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Powerful.
Wow.
New
And listen,
Hope, if
Karen
you're
wants to
watching,
know,
this
do
is
you
going to be
do-
required viewing for board meeting on Sunday. Just telling y'all right now.
Mike, Karen Black wants to know, do you have workshops on YouTube?
That's a great question too. We don't have workshops on YouTube, but we do have, and thank you for asking that, Karen, is the Adventist Learning Community. Adventist Learning Community. If you type that into Google and then you say philanthropy, it will pull up a series of 5 modules, about 40 different courses that we have. I am going to be working on some other things that I will be adding, Karen. So kind of keep an eye out for that, especially for the academy sector, where we'll just really go back through and teach academy fundraising from A to Z. The process is the same no matter
Excellent.
whether it's an academy or a church. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Resource.
Thank you. yes. You talk about relevant, number one. Like this is, you talk about resource.
Mercy.
My goodness.
Yeah.
And this is a real conversation. I thank you so much. We talk about a part 2 all the time. We started off this show earlier today. We talked about the last program we had. It has to be a part 2. But let me tell you something, Mr. Mike Brown, Dr. Michael Brown. We need you back. We got to have you back. Like that's just, we got to have you back. Really, we do. So by God's grace, we got to make that happen. This is required for every pastor that's coming into the field. If you desire to work for the Seventh-day Adventist Church as a pastor, as a principal, if you desire to be a president, you need to sit down at the feet of Michael Brown.
Well,
Yes.
This is exciting.
Awesome.
Good stuff.
Listen,
Yeah.
Mike, thank you so much.
Here you go. Where'd he go? There he is. All right.
There you go.
There we go. There we go. There you go. Live TV. No. Mike, thank you again for joining us tonight. We didn't know how this was going to end up, but definitely it was precious. And so we want to thank you for the time. Thank you for the information, the knowledge. I think this was the first night we ever all took notes,
Yeah.
written notes.
Yes.
As
I
the
got
program
front
was
and
going
back.
on.
Yes.
So we want to say thank you. We want to say thank you to our viewers. We couldn't do this without you. We could not be here. We could not be in this space if you didn't join us each Friday night, each time we went live. So we thank you for that. We ask you to share with those who you think will be blessed and those you know need to be blessed by this presentation tonight. And we look forward to seeing you again here at the Pastors Roundtable next week, where we'll continue this financial conversation. We will continue on next week talking about, I think it's church finances. We'll be really delving into local church finances on next week. Thank you so much for joining us. My hosts, on behalf, thank you for being here as we try and strive to make ministry relevant,
Resourced.
And real. God bless.
Take care, everybody. Have a
God
good
bless
night.
you. Goodbye.